Man, does Christopher Nolan love a multi-layered story. But does it feel cohesive and coherent? Stay tuned to find out. Now, I rarely do this, but I'm going to omit from giving a plot summary, and I'll tell you why. This is the kind of movie where any plot details that I mention will inevitably ruin the experience for you folks. So this review will be me giving my thoughts on Tenet, just in terms of the tone and the feel of the movie. Rest assured people, there'll be no spoilers in this review. When I walked out the theatre for the first time after seeing Tenet, the first thing that became apparent was that there's a lot of storyline to grasp. This is because there's a lot of world building involved in the movie, particularly in the first act of the story. It means many characters will deliver expositional dialogue to explain the mechanics of the plot. However, this wasn't a problem for me where it normally would be in most cases, and that's because Chris Nolan gives the viewer just enough information on the plot before moving on to the next story element. Chris Nolan did a pretty good job of making these scenes not feel like we're going through a checklist of plot points. The world building in this movie means that Chris Nolan initially opts for a slow pace for the bulk of the first act. Despite this though, he directs the first act with a sense of flair and movement, as he never lingers on an expositional scene for too long. And once we do get into the meat of the story, Chris Nolan moves the movie along at a brisk pace, as Tenet becomes a cerebral, entertaining blockbuster that we've come to expect from the director. The acting is pretty solid across the board, with the standout performance coming from Kenneth Branagh. Though his character is one we've seen before in this genre type, he chews up the scenery whenever he's on screen. John David Washington is good in his role as the protagonist. He brings a sense of calm and confidence to his performance. He's also great in selling the dramatic and action elements of his character, which is especially important given the obscure nature of the story. Robert Pattinson is proving himself to be one of the best actors working today with another top performance. He brings a sense of charm and wit to his performance, and for me it meant that it was a delight to see his character whenever he was on screen. The action in this movie is an example of when great directing, cinematography and editing come together. Tenet has perhaps some of the most outlandish, complex action that you're likely to see from a Chris Nolan movie, or any movie for that matter. At the same time, because the movie takes the time to explain the mechanics of the story, the obscure nature of the action never once struck me out of the movie. Add to the fact that Chris Nolan filmed many of the action set pieces on location, it just made the action that much more entertaining for me. This also kept the characters grounded despite some of the off-the-wall action that we see in the movie. In terms of the negatives of the movie, there's quite a few to say the least. This is a movie that requires at least 2 viewings, as there's so much story and world building involved. It meant that I was confused in some parts of the story, and that's never a good sign when you're trying to tell a story that involves a lot of world building. There's a lack of character development in Tenet from start to finish. It meant that I was unable to latch onto any of the characters on an emotional level. With the exception of Robert Pattinson and Kenneth Branagh, the rest of the cast were unable to infuse their characters with any sense of personality. For any fans of Hans Zimmer's collaborations with Chris Nolan, you'll be glad to know that Tenet follows similar suit, as Ludwig Göransson is on composing duties this time around. The drowning, loud, bombastic musical tones of Hans Zimmer can definitely be heard in Tenet. There's a lot of wah. Sorry folks, that's my worst impression of a Hans Zimmer score, but that's basically what you hear a lot on the score. In all honesty, I've never been a fan of this style of musical scoring in any shape or form. And it's definitely a shame that Ludwig Göransson didn't bring his own musical sensibility into this movie. The movie also feels a tad too long, especially in the third act of the movie. If the movie's runtime was shorter by 5 or 10 minutes, then it would have given the story a greater sense of urgency and tension. So just to give you my overall thoughts on Tenet, with a story that's mostly engaging despite the vast amount of world building involved, though it does sometimes trip up in this department from time to time. Once we get into the meat of the story, Tenet becomes the cerebral, entertaining blockbuster that we've come to expect from Chris Nolan. The movie has solid acting across the board, with a stand-up performance from Kenneth Branagh, though there's a considerable lack of character development in the movie, as most of the cast are unable to infuse any personality into their performances. Some of the most outlandish action set pieces you're likely to see in any movie, let alone a Chris Nolan movie, as the decision to shoot the action on location makes the action grounded and entertaining at the same time. I wasn't a big fan of Ludwig Göransson's score, which unfortunately sounded like a carbon copy of your average Hans Zimmer droning score. Finally, the third act of the movie fell flat for me, especially in the pacing department. Overall, I'm going to give Tenet a 7 out of 10. So, I now hand it over to you guys. I'm interested to hear your thoughts in terms of whether or not you enjoyed Tenet, and where do you think this movie ranks in the pantheon of Chris Nolan movies, so interested to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe buttons, and be sure to hit the notification bell for updates on the latest videos. I hope you enjoyed this movie review, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.